Afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Kyle Mox. I'm Associate Dean for National Scholarships at Arizona State University. I am also the Director of the Lorraine W. Frank Office of National Scholarships Advisement, which is the office at ASU that helps all current ASU students and recent graduates find and compete for major external awards. So I am also the campus representative for both the Rhodes Scholarship and Marshall Scholarship. And so, um, yeah, so I'm the best person on campus to talk to about these awards. And so today we're going to talk about a range of prestigious UK fellowships that all of which support graduate study in the United Kingdom. So yeah, also joining me today is Alexander Sojourny. So Erin Schulte also was to have joined us, but she works for the National Security Agency. And so her schedule sometimes changes unexpectedly. And so let's hope nothing's amiss. And she just had a meeting moved, but she did contact me. She did want to let me know, as well as all of the other alumni, recent alumni I talked to recently, that they welcome questions from you all. And so, feel free to reach out to them via LinkedIn or your email. So, Alex, you want to introduce yourself to us? Tell us a little bit about what you studied at ASU and what you studied in the UK as a Marshall Scholar.
Yeah, hello everybody. My name is Alexander Sojourny, as the slide says. I graduated from ASU in 2020. I studied for a major political science and as a minor justice studies. I was awarded a Marshall Scholarship in 2021. I first studied at the University of London Goldsmiths in politics development with a focus in the Global South. Then after that, I had the opportunity of studying at the University of Oxford in a degree in comparative social policy, looking at housing discrimination.
Great. And what are you doing now?
Right now, I'm applying for law school. I'm also working for a public interest firm that focuses on housing equity.
Great. Thank you. So Alex will certainly chime in as we're moving through his perspectives. Greatly appreciated. As much as I know about these awards, I've never won one myself, right? And I haven't had that experience, and I think that's helpful for the student perspective. So just to give you some scale and scope of what it is we're talking about here, these types of awards that we're talking about differ from the scholarships that most of us are familiar with. Um, in terms of mere financial aid, right? Many of us are getting scholarships of some kind, whether need-based or merit-based, but national scholarships, or what I often call fellowships, are open to students from and applicants from all over the country, in some cases, even the entire world, which means that they have very large applicant pools, which means they're also very competitive. Because they're very competitive, there's scarcity. And when anything is scarce, it becomes incredibly valuable, right? And so that's where the prestige does tend to come in here, is that people who win these awards have gone through an incredibly difficult selection process where they've been chosen from a pool, a very large pool in the hundreds or even thousands, and in competition against applicants from other universities. So it is, quite a resume line to have won one of these awards, and it does carry quite a bit of merit along with it. They are all merit-based, meaning that they are using their own criteria to identify candidates who best fit their vision and their mission, not necessarily taking into account financial need factors. In terms of my office and what my role is in this process, we're obviously doing webinars. All right, you're here now. We do a lot of information sessions throughout the year, and so if you're not subscribed to our bulletin, or you haven't spent time on our website to see our events page, I encourage you to do that, right? Because we like to ensure that you find what's a good fit for you. One of these awards may be a good fit. One of these awards may not be a good fit, but there might be other awards that are excellent fits for you. Once you get into an application process for any of these awards in particular, you'd be working one-on-one with someone from the office. I'm the primary advisor for all the awards that we're talking about today. A big part of that is writing instruction, meaning that you'll be sending drafts of your application materials to me for feedback as well. I hope you're working with other mentors, but I know this audience very well. And then if you are selected for a finalist for one of these awards, there's often an interview, and we will help prepare you for the interviews as well. Alex can certainly talk about both of those experiences here in a moment. I organize all the campus committees because many of these awards also require university nomination or endorsement, meaning that you must first apply to ASU to endorse the application before it can be sent to the national committee. And then I work with those faculty on that committee to understand how the programs work, but I also work with many faculty who are writing letters of recommendation to ensure that we're putting together the most competitive packages possible. So kind of a concierge for everyone involved in the process, making sure that you have what you need and the foundations have what they need and the faculty have what they need. So today's topics, I'll get into more detail about the Rhodes Scholarship, the Marshall Scholarship, which Alexander won, Gates Cambridge Scholarship, Churchill, and the Fulbright U.S. Student Program. So we tend to take a strategy of what is your objective, right? If you tell me your objective is to win a Rhodes, you've missed the point. Your objective, right, is to have this experience abroad in a leadership development program and also get a world-class education at one of the best universities in the world. Any of these awards can achieve that objective, right? And there are many other awards that can achieve that same objective. So we're more focused on what it is you want or need, not necessarily which award you want to win. I mentioned that these are very competitive, right? And I'm going to put this out in the front before we all get too excited. And I'm never going to sugarcoat this, and I'm always going to be very straightforward with people. The Rhodes Scholarship, which is the best known of these awards, mainly because it's the oldest, is very, very competitive, right? You know, over 2,500 applicants, you know, opened applications last year, meaning that they started an application for this. About 250 universities and colleges actually nominated a student for this last year, which is interesting when you consider that there's 2,200 plus colleges and universities in the US. Those 250 schools nominated 862 applicants. From that pool, only 32 were selected. So if you look at it that way, you know, overall odds of success under 4%, that's kind of on par with the admission rate for Harvard, Stanford, Princeton, Yale, right? And so if you put that in that context, a lot of people would say, oh, no, I could never get into Yale, and then sort of glibly mount a Rhodes Scholarship application. You know, the Marshall Scholarship is in that same category. Mitchell, which is on pause this year, in that same category. Churchill, a little bit better. Gates, Cambridge, a little bit worse because it's a global competition. And then for Fulbright, I'll explain a little bit later, but it really just depends on which university you're applying to, because each competition is separate depending on which university you're looking at. Some are less than 1%, some are much higher than that. So you're thinking about applying, you know, let me start with reasons you shouldn't apply, right? These are not good reasons. You're just looking for money, right? Putting 100 hours of labor into something with a 3% success rate is not a good use of your time if you just need money, right? You've got to want more out of this process than just the cash. I don't know what to do after graduation, so I guess I'll do this, right? If you're looking for a gap year experience or just something to kill time until you go to med school, right? You've got to have some purpose here. If you just think that being a Rhodes or Marshall scholar would look great on a resume and help you get into McKinsey and Company or something like that, right? There are a lot of other ways to do that. And also, if that's really your motivation, you know, the selectors will be able to see through that pretty clearly. You know, everyone loves England and Ireland, right? If I would love to read an application where somebody tells me how much they hate England, but Americans love Ireland. They love all these British stereotypes and things like that. Everyone seems to have a relative that's been there, or you know, is from there, or something like that. None of these things make the applicant special, nor do the readers actually care, right? This is not impressive at all, and that's not a good reason to apply. And people are like, well, I got to take a chance. I'm like, well, you know, this is not a lottery, right? That, you know, there's skill involved, there's selection involved, there's subjectivity, and your commitment to the process actually determines quite a bit your odds of success. So, Alexander, you know, if you can remember, what was your motivation for applying? What led you to this process in the first place, if you can recall?
For me, I think it was amidst like BLM, and you know, there was hot in conversations surrounding like restorative justice and equitable policy, and like being involved in ASU student government, and within the courts within Arizona. It's something that I wanted to advocate my voice and you know, advance you know, policies and just learn a different perspective. And Marshall and Rhodes really you know, gave me a conduit to do that.
Mhm. You kind of quickly mentioned BLM and your involvement with the courts. Can you unpack that a little bit? You know, our audience may not be familiar with your work in those areas.
Yeah, so I had the opportunity of being an intern for the Supreme Court of Arizona, where I worked with them on restorative justice measures. It was I had the opportunity of like speaking before the Senate Judiciary Committee, as well as working with the executive director of the courts to push legislation that was eventually signed by Governor Ducey at the time.
Great. So let's focus on the positive, right? Alexander, I outlined some very good reasons, wanting to have this social impact. We also believe that the process itself is the outcome, right? Anyone who goes through one of these selection processes or application processes, you'll learn a lot about yourself because you have to formulate a personal vision. You have to talk about what it is you want to see in the future. And if you have that clarity of thought and clarity of vision, you become a better leader, right? Leaders are people that say, "Hey, y'all, this is what I think we should do," and then motivates people towards that goal. That's a great leader. And if you're able to do that, if you're able to learn how to do that, then you automatically improve your leadership skills. We also know that if you don't submit, the answer is definitely no, right? That's one thing for certain. Everything else is uncertain, but that's for sure. And in our most recent survey data, this is a little older graph, but it's been pretty stable the last 8 or 9 years. About 90% of our applicants either agree or strongly agree that regardless of the final outcome, they thought it was valuable going through the application process. Alexander, would that square with your experience? I mean, I know that your perspective on it's kind of sweetened because you did win, but thinking back on the process itself, would you have found it valuable even if you hadn't won?
Yeah, to be completely honest, you're right. I like for the audience to know, like I was a finalist for Rhodes, but I didn't get the Rhodes. Um, but the amazing thing about the application that I crafted with ONSA and with Dr. Mox is it was uniquely me, and it was an application that I worked on that was like so unique and specific. It was just so unlike anything that I've ever done, and I was able to take the best parts of that and use it in other areas. I use it for the Marshall application, and I still use some of it to this day applying to to jobs and to different organizations. So I would say um, elimination sometimes, it's good. It works in your interests. So if I could go back and tell myself that, I would just say that, like being eliminated helps you in a different opportunity you might not know.
Right. Absolutely. We like to say that rejection is just another kind of feedback, right? Or maybe a way of saying not yet. And so, these are all quotes from other people that have applied for these awards in the past. They comment that, "Hey, I've really improved my connections with my faculty members. I've got letters of recommendation prepared now that I can use for a lot of different situations. I used all of the writing that as Alexander just said, I modified this for other purposes." Um, you know, the timeline being what it is for these, if you're thinking about graduate school in the US, you'll have completed all of these applications prior to your graduate school application. So you'll have your letters in place, you'll have most of your personal statement written because you can just modify what you've done for this. And it's going to make you more competitive. As this person points out, I've applied for fellowships and been denied, but it feels like each time I become more competitive. Um, I know we were just talking about this in another setting, that if you go and you read the biographies of the Rhodes and Marshall scholars, it's very intimidating. It's very impressive. But if you look at the biography, all they do is talk about the things that they accomplished. They don't talk about the things that they failed at. They don't talk about the things they didn't finish or the things that didn't turn out in their favor. And I promise you, anybody that's trying to get somewhere in life tries and fails a lot, right? I forget the exact number, but Babe Ruth also had a lot of strikeouts in addition to home runs. So, um, thinking about the growth potential of this, you can feel proud of the work that you put in. You can feel like you finished something. We able to prove to myself that I've accomplished some great things. If you can stop and look back, and you know what, I have done some pretty amazing things. I could be proud of myself, proud but not satisfied, and then reflect back on my life experiences, and you have some clarity, at least at this point in life, about why you do what you do, what are the seemingly random events that have led up to this point that actually had to happen that way for you to be where you are. And so that's actually a pretty useful point of view. So all that being said, we do win, right? And actually, pound for pound, ASU is one of the best performing public universities in the US. And I point that out because obviously the highly selective, small liberal arts schools have a huge advantage here because Harvard produces great graduates because that's all they take in. ASU has a 90% admission rate, and we produce just as great graduates. And I think that's more commendable. There's a better rate of change there. So, we've had 3 Rhodes Scholars, 5 Marshall Scholars, 6 Gates Cambridge Scholars, a lot of Fulbrighters. A lot of people call and ask, what's the secret? How do you get such high performance, with this large of a student body, with this, high of an acceptance rate? The answer is simple and obvious. We just work really hard, so there's no secret to it. Recently, just in the 2023 competition, so both Nathaniel and Katie are currently in the UK, having just wrapped up their first year of study. So Nathaniel, as a Rhodes Scholar, is doing comparative social policy at Oxford. Katie was at Cambridge doing something in water engineering or water management, and she actually had changed her plan for year 2 and is now on her way to Oxford for next year. She just let me know that she got accepted. So Nathaniel is actually right in Arizona right now. He had another engagement he would have liked to have joined, but he did be sure to say, hey, let everyone know. Katie would love to have joined us as well, but she's still in the UK right now and is attending some kind of networking event. So anybody that's got enough free time, right, is probably not somebody you want here. We're lucky that Alexander had just gotten back from UK himself. So looking sharp. Always love that outfit. Love that picture. If you've been to the West Campus, it's a great view. Inevitably, applicants are going to ask me at some point, do you think I'm competitive, right? If I were very good at answering this question, I would be in some kind of Hall of Fame, right? It's like if I could pick the winners after a 20-minute meeting, I'd be way better at this than I am. Nobody can really do that because every student's unique. Every fellowship has different criteria. There are a lot of human beings involved in this process. You might be the 3rd application from a biomedical engineer that they've read today, and they're just like, I don't want anymore. Or they just don't like people named Fred, or whatever. There's a lot of things in here. And I'm not going to generalize about what makes a great candidate for these awards, because again, they have different priorities. But we'll talk about kind of general areas of what are they looking for? They're looking, of course, at academics. They're looking at your CV and your resume, especially in terms of leadership and service, because those are key criteria for all of these awards. They're really looking at, do you have a unified purpose? Like, do you know where you're heading? Do you know why you need this? I think that can actually be one of the hardest questions of why do you want to go study in the UK? And then you have a clear idea of what the potential impact you could make if you get this. And so I would say that all of these fellowships are looking to play a role in your life, and they want to know that if you get this experience, it will accelerate you towards, the betterment of society. It'll move you towards, the thing that you want to do that's going to improve the world. I'd like to think anyone that's highly competitive for one of these awards is probably going to do great things with or without the award. But I think the Rhodes and Marshall programs in particular, Gates, Fulbright, things like that, expedite that process, right? I think they're going to help you level up much faster. So I don't know, Alexander, you've met a lot of these types of folks. Would you agree with that in terms of the process and what it's brought you, or the experience of being a Marshall Scholar itself?
Yeah, I fully agree. Just the ability to see a different way of life and a different cultural understanding that's just not familiar to me. I think that it is so important. And then also the question of, am I competitive? The same question, I had the same doubts. And everyone who I've met who's a Marshall, Rhodes, or Gates Cambridge, there's also that imposter syndrome. And I think Dr. Mutz was speaking to, I think you have to have some belief in yourself as well as the mission that you're on. And I think that at least that brought me some type of fulfillment.
Yeah, absolutely. Well put. So in terms of academics, the way the metaphor I often make is it'll if you're waiting in line at a cool club, your GPA will get you into the club, but it doesn't guarantee you're going to have a good time. It's so, there are minimum GPA standards for many of these awards, but keep in mind with an applicant pool approaching 1,000, a good chunk of those applicants also have 4.0 GPAs, right? And so it's a minimum standard, but these are the other things they're considering, in context, in your major, in your college, at your university, compared to other students like you. Also considering that maybe you have multiple majors. If you have less than perfect grades, which is not fatal, Did you start out a little weak and get stronger? Was there a dip in there? Is there something that explains the dip? Are there certain subjects that you seem to struggle with more than others? And when we say struggle, maybe you got a B minus. Um, they also want to see a varied, challenging and varied curriculum, meaning that you are taking the most difficult courses that are in your field. You are preparing yourself way, and that's the appropriate curriculum. Like if you say you want to do social sciences research, well, I really hope that you've taken a social sciences methods course. If you want to do economics at LSE, that you're going to need to have taken multivariate calculus and a really heavy quantitative load. Um, Students that succeed in these competitions often have multiple majors, right? Nathaniel had a quadruple major, and I don't even remember what all of them were. And I think he had 2 or 3 minors as well. I remember one of them was dance, which was compelling, right? That's the one thing actually everyone remembers is he had a dance minor. Um, and it's not necessarily going out and gobbling up majors just for the sake of doing it. It's because a lot of competitive applicants have synthetic interest, meaning that, yeah, I'm interested in physics, but I'm also curious how that intersects with uh, social justice. Or in Katie's case, she was a mechanical engineer, but she was really interested in sanitation issues and women's health, right? And so, how do those two areas intersect? And that's where we come up with new knowledge, right? Is by combining, previous areas of study, and they really want to see intellect in action, meaning how do you take what you're doing in the classroom and translate that into having a voice? Are you getting published? Are you speaking out? Are you leading organizations? Are you co-authoring journal articles, presenting at conferences? What are you doing with this knowledge that you're learning? So, Alexander, you talked a little bit about interning with the Supreme Court in Arizona. What are some other ways that you put what you were learning in the classroom into action outside the campus?
Um, I had the opportunity of being the deputy director for the Biden presidential campaign in Arizona. I also had the opportunity of being well, this is within Arizona State University,
Mm,
but the student body president of the West Campus.
mhm.
Uh, and yeah, in those two positions, I was able to advocate for a lot of civic engagement, community interest in the voting registration, um, and just a lot of discussions.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's if political science just remains a subject you study, then what was it for, right? So we need to know how to turn that into leadership and action. As I mentioned, service and leadership is really important for all of these awards. They're looking not just for, as Rhodes says, no mere bookworms, but people of action. And so when they say leadership potential, they want to mean they mean that there is evidence of this potential, meaning that you've tried to be a leader on whatever scale is accessible to you, whether that's just on your campus or at a state level or something larger. Katie, for instance, was one of the national chairs for 4-H. So one of like I think the 4 U.S. national chairs of that entire organization, right? Which is kind of a cool thing. And if you think about intersection of engineering and hands-on work, it makes total sense. Um, so like, what have you done? What have you done to try to change things already? Because potential without any action is worthless, right? They like to see creative leadership, meaning that you're not just somebody who stepped into a pre-existing position or you just volunteered to be the vice president of, the social chair for, Model UN or something like that. Model UN's hilarious because like everyone who's in Model UN gets some kind of leadership title. They want to know, like, are you an activist? Are you trying to change things? Are you an advocate for people? Are you going after, justice? Um, and I know some people who are like biochemists are like, what does that mean going after justice? Well, I mean, you understand the social impact of the work that you're doing, right? Even if you are spending most of your time in the lab. And your activities should seem intentional, right? I know at the university, particularly in the first couple of years, there's an overwhelming number of choices of things you could do. And a lot of times people hunt and peck and just kind of put together a good looking resume. But at a certain point, that needs to start to coalesce into something intentional and purposeful, right? That we can see how one experience led to the next. And that results in something I call unity of purpose, that we can see what the cause is. A running joke in our office is that we forbid the use of the word passion, right? If I see it, I just cross it out of your essays because you shouldn't have to tell us, right? We should be able to see it because we look at your resume. or look at your letters of reference, and it's quite clear what's important to you, what you're passionate about. And for most of the award, that's an issue of public concern. Alexander was very interested in racial justice and injustice, and helping improve our legal system to be equitable and fair. Obviously, that his success determines, is relevant to our success as a society as well. And your ability to go back and connect the dots, right? Seeing how all of the seemingly random choices you've made or all the events of your life actually drive you towards a larger purpose, and that's pretty important. But so yeah, and I know that can seem intimidating to somebody 19, 20 years old, right? But it has to start someday. So I'm going to jump in a little bit to details about specific awards, and obviously I'm not going to go way deep into these. That's a conversation for another time. But we'll start with Rhodes, since that's the one that has the best name brand recognition. It is the oldest one, right? It was established in 1902. The first class was taken in 1906. And the original money for this program came from the estate of Cecil Rhodes, who was one of the founders of the De Beers diamond magnate. And if you study African history, you might have heard of a country called Rhodesia, which was named after Rhodes because he owned all of that land. There are some pretty serious colonial legacies there, and we can get deeper into that in another time. But it is an important topic of conversation of how do we relate to the sins and errors of the past. And for what it's worth, none of Rhodes's original money is still being used in the Rhodes Scholarship. It's since gone on, but he did establish the original criteria for this award. It has changed a bit over time. They were very progressive and started admitting women to it in 1967. Interesting thing about Rhodes in comparison to many of these other awards, it has a global constituency, or a global pool, exactly. So 32 of the 100 awards given per year go specifically to Americans. The other 78 awards are going to, or 68 awards are going to applicants from various constituencies. So Ngoni, for instance, was a Rhodes Scholar from the Zimbabwean constituency. They have Germany, China, UAE, and they even have a global constituency for applicants who don't fit with one in one of the other categories. So if you're not a US citizen, chances are good that you would fit within one of the other constituencies. They'll have slightly different timelines, but generally the same application process. GPA 3.7. The other limiter is that you can't be older than 24 to apply. So it really doesn't matter, if you're out of school or alumni, as long as you're under that age, that's fine. And you have to be admissible to Oxford, right? Both Rhodes and Marshall do not require you to apply, but once you've been awarded the fellowship, they will work to place you in the programs that you've chosen, and you need to be admissible to that, right? Which can be kind of awkward if you're not admissible to one of these programs. So of course, baseline is you have to have a bachelor's degree before you can start your graduate programs. Footnote that for the Rhodes Scholarship, another option is also to pursue a second BA. Bachelor's degrees are 5-year programs in the UK. And so essentially you would step in with what they call junior standing and do the last 2 years of a bachelor's degree in the UK. Used to be very common in the 60s. Bill Clinton, for instance, did a second BA in PPE. Finish it. Don't tell anyone. But it's less common today. Students tend to be a little bit more specialized. When we get into Marshall, Alexander, we talk a little bit about what your placement process is like, and I know you've had some changes of heart and thought along the way. So here's an overview of the different constituencies. And the application is pretty straightforward. You simply include a 1 to 2 page resume. They used to call it a list of pertinent activities, which I thought was rather charming, but it's a more conventional resume now. 1,000-word personal statement. And that is an essay that's directed pretty squarely at the criteria for the award. A short essay of 500 words talking about the academic program that you plan to pursue, and then 5 to 8 letters of recommendation. So I can't think of another fellowship or another program of any kind that requires this many letters of recommendation. 4 of those need to be academic references. And so we usually want our applicants to go with the 8, just to make sure that you're as competitive as possible. And then, of course, you need to be endorsed by ASU. So, Alexander, I don't remember. I don't think the prompt had yet changed when you applied. I don't know if you remember, but was it still sort of describe your academic and other interests, or had they gone to the 3-part question when you applied?
If I remember correctly, I think it was academic interest, like overall.
Yeah. So, and about, was it last year or the year before? They actually changed their prompt, which is pretty historic considering, to really focus more on their sort of leadership framework of self, others, and world, and really wanting to know how do you meet, the selection criteria, and where do you see yourself functioning in the world? So, criteria, these are pretty much as written in Cecil Rhodes's will from 1902. First is literary and scholastic attainments, right? What they mean by that, of course, is your transcripts, academic excellence, but also awards, honors, publications, anything else that goes into that category. The one that's most often misunderstood is energy to use one's talents to the full. I quite love that. And it used to go on to say, as exemplified by a fondness for and success in sports. They've since modified that to mean any sort of mission-driven, team-based activity. So it could be debate, dance, art, theater, music. Any kind of extracurricular activity where you are working in groups with other people, right? They want to see that energy to follow through on the things that you want to do. The third one is a sort of a bucket of abstractions. So truth, courage, devotion to duty, sympathy for and protection of the weak, kindliness, unselfishness, and fellowship. I always find this kind of ironic if you know anything about the history of De Beers and diamond mining in sub-Saharan Africa, um, but they want to see how do you meet these ideals and the moral force of character and instincts to lead and to take an interest in one's fellow beings. Rhodes's original idea was that they would bring together young leaders from the entire British Commonwealth to have a shared intellectual experience at Oxford, because he had been to Oxford and he thought it was pivotal in changing his worldview and developing him into a young leader. And so he wanted people to have that common experience and then go back out into the world, with that shared fellowship. It's obviously grown tremendously since then, right, and grown well beyond the British Commonwealth. So. Um, the Marshall Scholarship is very similar. It's a little younger, founded in 1953, actually to commemorate the Marshall Plan, right? So this is the British Parliament's way of saying thank you to the U.S., to everything that the United States did in the rebuilding of Europe and England in particular after World War II. The major difference with Marshall is that it's tenable anywhere in the UK. So for many applicants, that actually makes it a better choice because Rhodes is only at Oxford. There may not be a program that you want to do at Oxford. Katie's past for instance, did not apply to Rhodes because at the time there wasn't a program that interested her at Oxford. Obviously, her thinking has changed because she just got accepted to Oxford for her second year. But at the time, she's like, "Well, I don't want to study at Oxford, so I'm not going to apply for Rhodes." Perfectly fine. There's 20,000 other choices to make among graduate programs in the UK. Much like the Rhodes, it pays for everything, including a living stipend, including travel back to the US. And unlike Rhodes, it actually has dependent support. So if you're thinking about getting married or taking a child with you, they kick up the money a little bit. So if you need an excuse. So unlike Rhodes, this is only for US citizens, right? Because this is part of the US UK alliance. They don't have an age restriction, but you need to apply within 2 years of getting your bachelor's degree. Again, a 3.7. You can't have received a British graduate or degree of any kind. And much like Rhodes, you do need to be nominated. They're so similar in scope and purpose that we just bundle them together, which is why the application process at ACU is kind of combined. I have never had an American applicant, apply only for Rhodes. They've always also applied for Marshall. Similar to the Rhodes, it's got a 1,000-word personal statement, 3 500-word essays, which kind of break out into different topics, 3 letters of recommendation, and one primary. So whoever you think your strongest recommender is, a general one, which is often an academic letter, and then one that's focused on leadership. So a little bit more writing, but it kind of ends up doing much of the same things as Rhodes. So, Alex, what do you remember as being the most challenging part of the application out of all of this, for you anyway?
I think by far, at least for me, was the 1,000-word personal statement.
Mhm.
I probably went through, like with you, probably over 100 types of like revisions and edits of that personal statement, and like grasping my individuality in 1,000 words. It
Mhm.
was so difficult, but also so rewarding after the fact.
Yeah. Yeah, I can remember, how different the final draft was from the original draft, yet still the same, right? Still the same in essence and sort of theme, but really just figuring out what's the most effective way to tell this story to this audience. But yeah, you certainly were a great student of the process. The selection criteria are just three basic areas, and then there's a lot of subcategory, sub criteria within each of these. But they're looking at academic potential or academic merit, your leadership potential, and then ambassadorial potential, which is a little different than Oxford or the Rhodes, right? Because Rhodes is really thinking about your position as a global leader. Marshall's really concerned with your ability to maintain U.S.-UK relations. How are you going to benefit from your time in the UK? But more importantly, how are you going to make sure that this alliance endures well into the future? And then quickly, the Gates Cambridge Scholarship. This was relatively younger. They just celebrated their 20th anniversary not too long ago. It was established by a $210 million donation from the Gates Foundation. Must be nice to have that kind of cash to throw around. You can use this to study for any graduate degree at Cambridge University. That can be a master's degree, graduate, or a doctoral degree. Um, whichever one you like. It's 80 awards per year, and 25 of those are for U.S. applicants. The remaining category are for people from all the rest of the world. As long as you're not a UK citizen, you can apply for this. Um, this one's a little different than the others in that you do need to apply for admission to Cambridge. And so the application for the scholarship is actually baked into the Cambridge admission application. So you have to apply pretty early in the year to actually be eligible. For the US applicants, that's first or second week of October. And for all the other candidates, that's depending on your program, December or January. So, um, and so your basic application is the admissions application. So that's a much different type of writing than you would do than say a Rhodes or Marshall personal statement. You're writing directly to the faculty at Cambridge to explain why you want to study there. But you also need to write a 500-word essay that explains how you meet the Gates criteria. Um, Interestingly, there's only 2 letters of recommendation required for admission to Cambridge. But if you apply for Gates Cambridge scholarship, you need to provide a 3rd letter that talks about your character. They're looking at intellectual ability, again, running with the theme. They like to know why you've chosen this particular course of study. So it is very focused on, your study at Cambridge. But because this is funded by the Gates Foundation, they'd really want to know, how is this experience? How is your knowledge, whatever it is you learn at Cambridge, how is that going to help you improve the world for others? And so if you just want to go and get a business degree and then go out and make a lot of money and be a titan of industry, great. But you're not going to be a Gates Cambridge scholar, right? They're looking at people that are going to solve problems in the world. And so also an incredible amount of leadership potential. So Churchill Scholarship, I bundle this one with Gates Cambridge because it's also at Cambridge, but this is only for STEM majors. And so you'll do a 1-year master's degree in STEM. And we probably should have mentioned at the outset, the majority of master's degrees in the UK are 1-year programs. And so as we heard from Alexander, oftentimes you'll do 2 1-year master's degrees with your fellowship. It's a very small award. Only certain universities are allowed to nominate students. ASU is one of those. We were admitted less than 10 years ago, and within the first year or two, Chris Balzer was actually awarded a Churchill Scholarship. Has an age limit because, again, they'd like younger leaders, and we can only nominate 2 students for this award. One of the things I like about this is that if you apply on the timeline, you will also apply for Gates Cambridge. So it's kind of a 2-for-1. So when you apply for Churchill, you by default also apply for Gates. Again, outstanding academic achievement, talent and research, personal qualities. So obviously that looks a little different in the context of a purely STEM applicant pool than it might in a diverse applicant pool. And then finally, just to touch on the Fulbright U.S. student program, it's a huge program, right? Over 2,000 U.S. winners per year, 8,000 winners globally for the Fulbright. It supports academic year experiences abroad. And so there are international Fulbrighters who come to the U.S., but again, as I mentioned, 2,000 U.S. students or recent graduates going out to conduct research, to enroll in graduate programs, to teach English, to learn practice of creative performing art. 140 different countries to choose from, right? But you can apply at any point after when you're about to have a bachelor's degree, but so long as you haven't had a PhD conferred. So our rising seniors would be the youngest group of people who could apply because you'll get your bachelor's degree before your grant period starts. I bring this up because the UK is one of the 140 to 150 countries you can apply to, is a little bit of an outlier in that all of their awards, save one, about 40 of their awards are specifically for graduate studies. So if you're looking at Marshall because you want to study at Aberystwyth or because you want to study at Leeds or something like that, you should also take a look at Fulbright because they may have an award specifically for that university that you want to do. You will need to apply for admission to the university, but the number of applications varies quite a bit depending on the university that you've chosen. A couple of years ago, there was over 100 applications for University College London. There's only one award. You do the math. So there's a lot of variance in there. Happy to talk about that in greater detail. Criteria, kind of vague, but there is no minimum GPA for Fulbright, which is worth noting. So just to give you a sense of timeline, the first deadline to be aware of is April 15. And that's where you'll need to submit your intent to apply. And that's just so we know how many applicants we'll be working with in this cycle. It's fairly minimal. There's not a lot of writing involved. You'll need to identify recommenders, but basically just basic information. And then between April and August, you'll be working with me and your mentors to be drafting your application. And then by August 15, we'll collect a campus application. So that would be actual draft of a completed application for Marshall or Rhodes. And then you'll participate in interviews. And then if the campus committee feels that your application is of sufficient strength, it will endorse the application. There's no quota. We don't have any maximum number of awardees or nominees or anything like that, but we do want to ensure that the applications going forward are as strong as possible. Application process is wrapped up by late November, so it's a pretty quick process overall. So, Alexander, what do you remember about the campus process? Do you remember going through the campus interview or dealing with any part of that?
Yeah, I remember. I think I applied a little late.
A little late, a little late.
Than you would have liked. But I guess like something that I would like to speak to is just the amount of like care and support I received from ONSA as well as you. Honestly, like if you were to go private, it would probably be around like $3,000, like you're spending just for how much assistance that you're getting, how much care that you're getting. And it really motivates you. So I would say like take, full advantage. ASU has one of the best national scholarship offices like in the nation. And I owe so much to them. So they're great people.
Yeah, thank you. Very kind of you. I practice, I can't speak for everyone in my office, but I practice what I call reflexive advising, meaning that I will work as hard as you will work. So even though Alexander did come into the process a little late for comfort, he worked very, very hard in a short period of time. And therefore, if he's willing to put in the work, I'm willing to put in the work, right? So, and it's a good lesson for life, right? People are usually willing to step up if you're willing to step up. In terms of Fulbright timeline, if that's something you'd like to learn more about or even learn about the other opportunities for teaching English abroad or anything like that, we have another event Wednesday. It's a hybrid event. You can attend in person or online, Fulbright Day at ASU. So check out our website and RSVP for that. And then shortly after that, we'll start taking intake appointments. It's on a pretty similar deadline to the UK program. So many of our applicants who apply for UK awards are also applying for Fulbright. So this year we had our first ever online student nominated for the Marshall Scholarship. She also applied for Fulbright UK, right? So a really great way, again, to focus on that objective, not necessarily the specific award that you want. So go out there and do some research, right? We'll follow up via email with a couple of handouts as well as directions to our campus application procedures. Go to these fellowship websites, right? Look at the Rhodes information, look at the Marshall information, look at the Gates information, read the scholar bios, right? If you're starting to say to yourself, I don't know, this doesn't really seem like a fit, then it's probably not, right? If you're not sure, talk to me. But it's very difficult to stretch yourself to fit into one of these boxes if it's really just not aligned with your background and your interest. Make sure you know what those deadlines are. It pains me to hear people say, oh, I didn't know. And just remember, the more competitive, more prestigious it is, the more competitive it is, the more work is required on your side. So I'll skip, we'll skip to the second advising appointment. I'll do the first advising appointment right now with all of you. Whatever you're thinking of highlighting in terms of your achievement must be remarkable in a national context, right? So you've got to figure out are the things that I've done, are the achievements that I'm going to highlight in my application, are they going to seem significant when compared to 800 other, really accomplished students? You must have a clear purpose, right? If you're truly undecided about where you're going in life, you better fake it until you can make it, right? You at least have to know what is one potential pathway that you could follow. And there must be evidence that you're on that pathway, right? If justice is important to you, we'd like to see how have you gone after it so far. Letters of recommendation are essential, right? And if you have absolutely no idea who's going to write your letters of recommendation, we really need to get to work on this. I can't emphasize enough how important that is. And the other piece of advice I'll give you, and it sounds a little harsh, this has nothing to do with you at all, right? It has to do with your potential to make a positive contribution to society. They don't care why you want it. They care what can you do for the world if you get it. And I hope that distinction makes sense. So as our application instructions will lay out, if this is something that you're interested in pursuing, any one of these awards that we talked about today, the first step is, of course, to do your research, but also to email me a copy of your resume and a copy of your transcripts. I can take a look once we have a better idea what it is you're trying to do and decide, okay, is this a viable thing or not? One way or another, we'll figure out what's a viable thing for you. And then we'll, do that attempt to apply and make a plan for the summer. So I hustled a little bit right there because I did want to save some time for Q&A before. So get your questions ready. And while we're doing that, Alexander, now that you've kind of been through the experience, what do you think the relevance of having gotten these degrees and the experience of being a Marshall Scholar is going to have on the rest of your career as you see it?
To be honest, at first, that's a great question, but just the amount of friends, the community that I made over there, it honestly, it's just amazing, indispensable. I'm going back to the UK in May, and I'm like seeing all of my friends, like over like 20 folks, and honestly, I consider them lifelong friends. And just seeing how they're also like institutions and their social systems work, they really inspired me to be like, okay, the US can, or at least within Arizona, we can learn to make, I don't know, our healthcare system better this way, or public housing more accessible this way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, good. Well, if anyone has questions, you're welcome to pop them in the chat, or if you'd like, you can unmute yourself and just simply ask. Alexis already had one in the chat here. Would mentioning our Barrett thesis be a helpful topic? And absolutely, I think one of the great advantages that Barrett students have is that they already have developed a focus. That thesis really can become the starting point of a premise to your graduate research or the graduate fields that you want to go into. And it gives you a point of expertise that you can start from, right? There ought to be one topic that you can talk about at least a little bit. Alexander, I don't remember, what was your Barrett thesis on? Oh, I remember what it was. Yeah, talk about it. Yeah.
Wait, do you want me to say it still?
Yeah, talk
Oh,
about it. Sorry.
it was on the prison industrial complex. And I had a family member who was within prison, and he was using rap as a form of like poetry within that, and just kind of describing experience that way.
Mm-hmm. Ebony, go ahead.
Hello, Dr. Mox. I'm proud of you, Alexander. So my questions, I have three, but they're short. So first, I was concerned about my age. So I know I'm out for the Rhodes, but the Marshall is open for any age.
Right.
You said something briefly about children. I do have a child. I have an 8-year.
Yep, they provide dependent support.
I'm sorry?
They do. Marshall does provide dependent support, as does Fulbright.
Okay. And then you said it briefly came up what to email you.
Resume and transcripts. Yep.
Resume and transcripts, and what to put in the subject title.
Use your imagination. I don't have anything specific.
So with the intent to apply, that's going to come in the next email, or where do I find that?
Oh yeah, once we've done an intake, you'll get access to that link. So, yep.
Okay. Transcripts and CV.
And again, we'll be sharing the application instructions via email pretty quickly after, as soon as this. Sorry, I was trying to put it in the chat. So as soon as the recording gets processed, we'll get it out and get other information out to everyone.
Just last one. Say CV. What I know, I can't say it. Curriculum. What's the last part?
VTake, yeah. So it's a good, yeah. A lot of people use those words interchangeably, but a resume tends to be more focused on professional stuff, whereas CV is an academic. It actually means educational life, and so it's usually longer. It details everything. CVs are usually longer than 2 pages, so we use those interchangeably depending on what you happen to have on hand.
Thank you.
Mhm. Other questions?
I have a question, Dr. Mock. So, in terms of resumes, I have a master resume and then I have a resume that I actually tailored to everything. Do you want to see my full resume with everything on it that I email over?
Yeah, I think it'd make more sense to share as much information as possible. You'd be surprised at what you think is or isn't relevant, right?
Okay.
And then as we get into the process, we'll work to tailor the resumes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions for Alexander about his particular experiences in the UK, or perhaps more about what he studied in the UK? Yeah, Alexis, go ahead.
Hey, sorry. So I know you had mentioned that there should be some kind of like national impact that we should have made. What if we're not confident in our accolades in that area?
Then you should get confident.
Okay.
Um, as Alexander pointed out, I don't. There were a couple Rhodes scholars that would probably have always been confident in themselves. You can spot them right away, but by and large, I think everyone who ends up finding success in these areas probably had some serious doubts along the way. So again, you may not know what's important or what's less important, but we don't know unless we ask, unless we try. Great.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And to clarify, not every applicant has had accomplishments of national importance, right? That's apparently Alexander's being a little bit humble. One of the things that we were able to point to is that he'd been quoted in the New York Times because he'd been heavily involved with organizing Black Lives Matter protests in Phoenix, right? It wasn't a large quote, it wasn't like a centerpiece or anything like that, but if you're doing something that's socially relevant enough where local media is interviewing you, that's a good example. It's not something he would have put on a resume. It's not something you'd put on your LinkedIn, or at least I wouldn't. But it's a good bit of evidence that shows kind of the type of work you're trying to do. So yeah, Ebony, go ahead.
Alexander, I have a question. So could you tell me, like we speak English, but we know the English is different there. How did you get over the language barrier? And academically wise, what did you find? What was the most challenging for you? You know how we go from elementary to college, and you have the teaching styles. Was there a big difference in the teaching styles and the lectures? What was those challenges that you faced?
Great questions. First, I would have to say British English, like their slang. It took me a while to get used to it, and they would say like ping or pang for like to like that they find someone attractive, and someone said pang, and I was like ping pong. What are you talking about? But yeah, it's so interesting that differences. To your second question, I would have to say, at least within Oxford, what I found challenging was within social policy, they had a very set, like particular definition of like the components of policy and what is considered such. And like within America, we talk more about like the intersectionality that really influences and molds policy, whereas in the UK, it's based more so on like class and the economy and stuff like that. So it was kind of a push and pull of how to incorporate things I learned at ASU and being an American within a UK, more of a traditional type of research.
How would you compare and contrast sort of the approach to education at the two schools that you were at compared to what you were used to at ASU?
I first think that Goldsmiths, it was much more similar to what I was used to at ASU. Goldsmiths is more of like a specialized, almost like a liberal arts college, at least for the UK. And the person who was the director of my program, Francisco, amazing person, and he was the director for post-colonial thought. He was really, really progressive in a lot of just the academic work that we studied. Whereas Oxford, I mean, it takes a while for them to change on and to be a little bit more forward in their thoughts. But yeah, both have, you know, really unique advantages, and I've learned so much from both communities.
Wonderful. Well, it'd be a pleasure if we could sit here for another hour or so and kind of talk through things. But unfortunately, our time for today is up. And I know you know, all of our alumni are happy to answer questions from if you want to reach out to them. Do look for an email from us sometime this afternoon that, again, provides some bullet points and links to important documents, instructions, things like that. And so I appreciate y'all making the time today. And then in particular, I'd really like to thank Alexander for making the time to sit with us today. So thank you very much. All right. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thanks for making the time.